Welcome to the only podcast recorded in the video store of the mind. It smells like fear, carpet, and old popcorn. This is Night Shift Video. I am a horrible host. My name is James, and tonight I am joined by my co-host, Josh. This is a bit of a spooky variety show where we talk about all kinds of things that go bump in the night. We also tie in the examples to movies, and we do a movie review at the end. But before we get into it, just don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the internet things, leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube, leave a review if you're listening to the podcast. All of those things just really, really help us out and help us become more discoverable. And also, if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and you put anything in there, anything, we'll read it on the air. Ask a question on there, we'll answer the question on the air. You could leave a 5-star review and then just put in the description that you hate the show, and I'm still gonna read it. So that's just a little incentive for you to have a bit of fun. So the other night, I was doing some readings.
Love it.
And I stumbled across a cryptid that I wasn't quite as familiar with. And that's the one that I sent to you for our topic for tonight.
Yes.
And this is the Enfield horror. So the general idea of this thing is it appeared in this like small area in southern Illinois, which, interestingly enough, was also kind of an area that's kind of like soaked in mythology and just like stories. Native Americans believe there was a lot of strange phenomena that happened there. This specific area even earned the nickname the Devil's Kitchen by early settlers.
I bet it's spicy.
I hope so. I don't know, like...
Or he makes really bad food.
Yeah, what if it's just super bland, you know?
Ugh, like mac and cheese with the bad cheese, you know?
I do know. I really do know. So in the early 70s, in this small town, southern Illinois, 10-year-old boy is playing out back, and he ends up bursting into the house, crying hysterically to his parents. He says that he saw a hideous, misshapen beast that emerged from the darkness and tried to attack him. And then it was described kind of by the adults as what seemed to be an otherworldly abomination. Just love the selection of words here. It was roughly 5 feet tall. It had 3 legs with short arms that had taloned hands, gray skin covered with slime, and giant red eyes.
Sounds like something I'd want to own.
It doesn't sound like anything I've ever seen before. That's for sure.
3 legs is usually
3 legs is the weirdest thing,
unique.
right? Like, is there anything that has 3 legs naturally?
A Trirex.
So in mammals... Mammals basically exclusively biologically exhibit either
biped,
quadruped, or what's the other one? Pseudo-biped, or like a bear.
Yeah.
That kind of does both.
Yeah.
Pretty much, there's not a lot of tripeds out there that I don't know of.
No.
Maybe some, maybe. Because I'm not a biologist by any means, but maybe there's like some insects or possibly like sea creatures, like crustaceans. Maybe there's some kind of crabs that only have 3.
No
I don't know.
I can think of.
Definitely no mammals. Nothing that big either. Just, this is, human sized. So about 30 minutes later, there is another sighting. Same night. It's a neighbor, and the neighbor, his kids said that like they heard some noises outside, and so he's like, okay, fine. And he goes out to see what it is after he finally hears it too. It sounds like some scratching on the side of the house, is like something trying to get in. Mm-hmm. He's probably just assuming possum, raccoon, whatever.
Yeah.
Goes out there and he sees this thing too, And he even shoots at it. He shoots at it multiple times, claims that he made contact, and it jumps away in a frantic fashion, moving like 75 feet in like 2 or 3 jumps, just like bouncing out of here.
Yep.
Pretty crazy. The police came in. They found unusual footprints and scratch marks on the house. So the footprints, they go into some detail. They talk about like toe pads and how many toe pads dog prints have versus like kangaroo prints because it was jumping. So some people said, oh, you saw a kangaroo in the middle of Illinois. Did it escape from a zoo? Australians just smuggling in roos all of a sudden.
Kangaroo Carol Baskins.
They have to exist somewhere, right? They have to exist somewhere. But according to these reports, the amount of toe pads and the placement of the prints just didn't match up, even with kangaroos, even though that's kind of an out there idea.
And they were too big, too.
Right.
Like really big.
Yeah. And so then a few weeks later, the same dude, and this is where it like starts to get a little bit of that unbelievability, of
course,
because like now we got the same guy seeing it again, but the same dude. You could also make the argument though that like, okay, it has a den or whatever somewhere near his house, and that's why he's seen it multiple times. So same dude sees it again, and he sees it from further away. He heard the neighbor's dogs barking. He goes outside to check it out, and he sees it lumbering at the train tracks across the street, just moving in a natural way. He claims that he watched it for a much longer period of time because it was so much further away. And so he was more like not just saying, hey, get the fuck away from my house, like it was the first time.
He's, okay, what is this thing I'm dealing with?
Exactly. And then he kind of just sees it lumber away and just kind of shamble into the woods. So that kind of kickstarts the whole Enfield horror sighting story. And then this thing just blows up. I mean, we are talking 70s. So like, obviously, you know, you don't have the internet. There's also, I feel like not as many, I feel like it's both sides. I feel like there's not as many skeptics because we haven't seen things proven to be false as quickly and easily as we do now. But there probably aren't as many believers because let's face it, we have some real crackpot theories these days.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like it was probably less extreme on both sides.
Yeah.
You know, further back in time with less technology and lesser forms of instant communication like what we would have today. Obviously, today it would be like, oh, you didn't get it on video on your phone. It couldn't be real. When it's like, then if he even could afford a camera, it would have been terrible, and he would have had to like lug it up from the basement or some shit, and like
it would have been on his shoulder trying to hold a gun. It would be, think of the Blair Witch Project, but so much worse.
So much worse. So obviously, it kind of kickstarts this big thing, and you are in Southern Illinois. So I guess for the uninitiated, I would say Southern Illinois has much more in common with most of Indiana. Definitely Southern Indiana because they're next to each other. And that is when you get like what I consider to be like the true hillbilly. There's like this proposed image of the hillbilly that exists in like pop culture of like Southern, but like these hillbillies aren't Southern hillbillies. These are like the Midwest. Those are like mountain people.
Yeah.
Like the Southern, like Tennessee, West Virginia. Those are like mountain people.
That's like Deliverance.
Yeah. That's Appalachia.
Yeah.
Like the hillbillies live in
the hills.
The hills. Which we like to say are like mountains, but they're not.
They're not.
They are much smaller.
If you jump really high, you can see over them.
And so basically all these crazy hillbillies show up to Enfield wanting to hunt this monster. All the gun-toting, rootin' tootin' shooting boys show up to camp out, drink beer, and try to catch this thing.
Sounds like a guy's weekend I want to be a part of.
Like, absolutely. And one of the, it kind of became a problem in Enfield. Like the police were like, all these people keep coming out here and getting drunk and then like shooting at shit and then like accidentally shooting each other or like shooting other people's personal property. Like we're having issues.
It's like drunk paintball, but deadly.
But then eventually this guy was from Indiana. He was a news director from a radio station out of Kokomo, Indiana. He came with his little group to do just the same thing. He was going to run a story. They were out there to try to shoot the Enfield horror. And they're out there, and he claims to have seen a gray creature stooped over like an ape moving through the woods at a very unnatural speed. And then he also was able to get an audio recording of like this blood curdling wail sound that it made, which of course he took back to make a story on the radio. Is this whole big thing. Now, the interesting kind of twist here is that having just 2 stories, 2 sightings, 3 if you include the reporter,
right?
It could definitely feel just like paranoia hype kind of thing, you know?
Of course.
But something interesting that kind of correlates is in the 40s, a town just 40 miles away from Enfield had a situation with a creature that they described to be somewhat similar. And they ended up blaming this creature that was seen a couple different times for some mysterious livestock deaths, which obviously is kind of the go-to when you're talking about
easy prey.
Yep. When you're talking about cryptids, you just gave them, meal on a platter.
Yep.
They're all pinned up and they know where they're going to be every single night.
Yep.
So that kind of like adds a little bit of credibility, I think, to the general story that there was another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not that far away. So this pretty famous cryptozoologist, Lauren Coleman, investigated the whole story just a couple years after these reports. He talked to everyone and also went to the dude's house who saw it at his house. He saw the scratch marks on the siding. Obviously, the footprints were gone by now, but he saw the scratch marks. He looked at all of the sites where it was seen. And like, he's kind of like, he's a cryptozoologist. So there's a definite confirmation bias.
Right.
But at the same time, he, I think of like all those movies of those like exorcism movies where there's always like the old priest and the young priest. And like the old priest is like seen a bunch of shit and knows when the exorcism or knows when the possession is fake and not real. And then like the crazy stuff starts happening. Is like, okay, now it's real. Like this guy's also that guy, like he's had enough people like call him out for him to do a story, be like, yeah, this is bullshit. Yeah. And he was able to walk away from the Enfield horror case completely just at a loss, pure bewilderment. No idea what the fuck this thing is.
That's always fun.
I mean, that's kind of, I'm sure it's frustrating. That's kind of what we want him to say.
Right.
At the end of the day.
It's like, no, it was a big possum carrying a raccoon and they were just going out on the town.
So that's the crazy thing is if you look up pictures of this thing at like artist renditions, it is one of the most terrifying things.
Yeah.
Like how would you describe it?
I think the third leg is really, really off-putting.
Yes.
And some of the renderings have like the kind of the ape, like the standard like bared teeth gorilla face with the 3 legs. And I don't know why it's so unsettling, but even just the tiny
arms
are just,
which kind of made me think of the thing from The Ritual.
Oh,
the way they depicted that was that big monster thing from folklore, but the way they depicted it, it had like those tiny little arms in front.
Yeah. I don't. It doesn't fit anything that you would think.
It's so unnatural. Natural. It's so unnatural. Yeah. And so when I was trying to think of like some movies to kind of like tie into the Enfield horror, it was a little difficult. First of all, if you search for the Enfield horror, you kind of have to include monster in your search terms. Otherwise, you're going to be taken to stuff about the Enfield haunting or the Enfield poltergeist, which is what The Conjuring 2 is based off of, which takes place in like Enfield, like England, Ireland, one of the two.
Yeah,
something over there, something UK-ish.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to include monster in there somewhere for you to really get this specific story. And because it is a cryptid, I thought we could tie it into some cryptid movies. So there's this movie called The Barrens, which features the Jersey Devil. It's pretty good. There is obviously the go-to Mothman Prophecies, which is a good cryptid movie. Even if it's not super scary, it's still a good movie. Then there's the Wendigo movie that was pretty good as well. But I felt like just like with the design of it, and I say design, it's not designed. It's not artistically designed like in a movie, but it seems like it is.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me a lot of kind of body horror or Lovecraftian type creatures, just because it is like it's one of those things that its depiction just seems so bizarre and like beyond anything that we've seen.
Like the way like the unnatural 3 legs thing, it for whatever reason makes me think of, and I can't think of the name. They're up in the top floor of the house, and the guy ends up being this weird creature from the other dimension. I can't remember the movie. It was like 70s. Oh my goodness, not The Void.
The Void was one of the ones I wrote down, for sure.
I guess that's another one. But did we watch a movie called The Beyond? It's the something.
Yes, that was it.
Okay.
From Beyond.
From Beyond.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
That is it. Which I didn't have that down, but I had that director down. So absolutely, it has that vibe of I did write it down. Never mind. The Fly, From Beyond, The Void, even The Thing a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And really anything from David Cronenberg or Stuart Gordon. So Stuart Gordon's the one who did From Beyond.
Gotcha.
He's also the guy who did Reanimator and Bride of Reanimator, all the other ones. But yeah, those definitely kind of fit into that same arena, that same kind of puzzle piece. And I mean, you could even go as far to say In the Mouth of Madness, just because you have like the big Lovecraftian monster machine thing at one point. So those are the things that I kind of came out with the most. I guess the biggest thing though is like if you're listening, you're probably just thinking like, oh, this is just like a monster, like just like a creature thing, and it is, but just I don't know, the way that it's described and the way that artists have depicted it is it seems so much more than that. It seems otherworldly. Some people have claimed extraterrestrial even. If this thing was real, maybe it's just not from this planet. Whereas I guess my go-to and kind of trying to explain it from a fictional standpoint is if it is real, maybe it's not from this plane versus the actual planet. So those were kind of what I was thinking, but man, that the third leg also, like in some drawings and like in some descriptions that people have given, it's also like the third leg is like small. And so like the 2 legs are like normal size and the third leg is like kind of a little stub that just kind of hangs off to the side. It's like, what is it even for?
It's a strong leg.
Maybe it like uses that to like grab onto your face and like suck your life force or some shit. I don't know. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break and we are gonna come back with our movie review. So yeah, that's about all that I have. We will be right back.
And now our feature presentation.
All right, and we are back, but before we get into our movie, I just want to let you guys know, if anybody out there wants to help out the show, please just tell a friend. That is the best way that we've seen growth through the show. And the more people that are tuning in, just the more opportunities we get to do cool things. You can also just join us at our Patreon, patreon.com/nightshiftvideo. That is NITESHIFTVIDEO. It's real easy for me to accidentally spell shit anytime that I do that out loud.
You know.
Night Shift Video, NITE is the important part to remember, where your monthly donations are going to give you access to our private Discord channel. We have Let's Watch audio tracks, which is the only thing that I have to call them right now. It's like a Let's Play, but it's us watching the movie. And
they're fun.
It's like a full audio commentary with us. It's like you're in the room with us. It's hilarious. Also, we have all kinds of physical goodies that you get too. So check us out on Patreon as well if you would like to help out the show. Okay. So our movie of the week is David Cronenberg's The Brood. This was a co-host pick, and I think this might be one of the only times that someone picked a movie and then they are not here to review the movie.
Oh.
Which is a little different.
You're right.
A little different.
Interesting.
So Cody chose this movie, and we're going to review it.
We are.
His review doesn't matter because he's not here.
Nope.
So first of all, I want to talk about the cover of the film because, you know, as a video store, a lot of times that's the only thing you have to go off of. Now, this movie has basically three kind of prevailing. I'm sure there's tons of releases of this film because it's from 79, I believe. But it has three like really common strong designs for the cover of the movie. The first is the original movie poster design, which is pretty good. I mean, this is like pretty kind of classic, even 80s. I mean, this is like a good movie poster. However, I would imagine the VHS does not look like this.
Yeah.
It's a great poster. I bet it was not the original VHS box.
Someone probably traced it in crayon or something.
Or they did something like this, which is the popular DVD cover.
Ugh.
It's bad.
It's bad.
It's bad. It's just red and black with some of the kids in the movie. There's a lot of children who it's like evil in the film.
Bad Children of the Corn, like Children of the Peas.
Yeah,
like,
it's rough.
Who wants
Maybe
that?
radishes or something.
Beets.
And then, of course, two picks in a row have you guys been dipping into the old Criterion collection. Because this is also a Criterion movie, which, of course, has a pretty bitchin' art on the box, but also something that I don't necessarily want on my shelf. So here's the art from the Criterion box, which shows kind of our main character, Nola, just real up close and personal. And if you didn't know the end of the movie and this is what's on the box, well, I guess I guess they spoiled the movie for you. So there's that.
Oof.
You know, like, it's good. The artwork's great. The people who make the Criterion boxes are always extremely talented. They get great artists to do them. But if I saw that, even if I saw the Criterion box at a video store, I'm not picking that shit up.
Yeah, and it's a little spoilery too.
It is. It's just a little too much, right?
Like if The Sixth Sense had, Bruce Willis. Just like look at
it's like him like laying in a coffin and like his gravestone is above him.
Just kidding.
Yeah, no, it totally kind of gives which I guess is not a twist necessarily at the end, but it just kind of gives away like you spend a lot of this movie just not knowing what's going on.
Or just the reveal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
When you see it.
Yes. So let's go ahead and read the back of the box here. Behind the walls of his secluded Soma Institute, Dr. Hal Raglan experiments with psychoplasmics, a controversial therapy designed to help release pent-up emotions in his patients. He keeps his star patient Nola in isolation, but as she vents her fury during their sessions, Brutal murders befall the people that she is angry with outside of the Institute. What is the connection between Raglan's methods and these monstrous killings? The answer will unleash a whole new breed of horror.
Man. That's really good.
Oh God, it's so great. So this is written and directed by David Cronenberg. This is his 5th film. Came out in 1979. So this comes after Shivers, after Rabid, which we haven't seen the original Rabid, but you were here when we watched the modern remake, the 2019 remake?
No.
Oh, the one with the like fashion designer chick?
No.
Nope. Okay. This is after that.
Okay.
And the idea here is, it's before Scanners, and it's also before Videodrome. So that's kind of where it is in his body work. Also before The Fly, obviously.
Yeah.
And, also we have, God, I forgot, after The Fly, he did Naked Lunch, and then even more recently, Crash.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, crazy that he even did that film. It kind of blows my mind. I would have watched that before I even knew what a Cronenberg was. And then now to know that the same guy who made Crash made fucking Scanners and The Fly. It's pretty nuts to think about.
It's like you just wanted a break.
Yeah. So he claims this film to be his most classically horror movie. And I think I understand where he's coming from in the perspective of it does feel like an even older horror movie than it is. It's very much a 70s movie, but it even has kind of vibes and feelings of maybe even a 60s movie.
Yeah. So a little bit of before we started this podcast, we were talking about the movie from last week.
Yes.
And I couldn't remember it at all. I had no idea. And one thing I do remember about it, like what you just said, it feels real old.
It does.
It does. Looks old. It just even the quality wasn't super great.
Yeah.
The video stuff, and like you said, it feels early 70s.
Yeah.
Maybe
even
latest.
it's 79, and it feels much earlier than that. I would say even just the style of storytelling and things like that. It was also made, obviously in Canada, which is it makes it
like 20 years behind.
I would just say that it makes it very obvious up front. As soon as this movie starts, you say, this is not a Hollywood picture.
Yes.
Like there are Hollywood horror movies. This is not one of them.
The production value is much lower than
we'll say different.
Used to.
We'll say different.
Yeah, different.
We'll say different.
Yeah.
So the other kind of interesting thing about this film is that Cronenberg wrote it whenever he was basically shortly after, or kind of in the middle of going through a divorce with his wife, and also in a major custody battle for his kids. And that's kind of where the idea comes from. So like the characters in this movie are rough facsimiles of him and his wife, which if you've seen the movie, you're definitely getting a very one-sided depiction of his ex-wife.
Yes. You know which camp he's in.
Which might be, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but that might be one of the biggest flaws with this movie. And one of the things that I found online was that a lot of people do this to a lot of movies of the time, and it's totally fair. Of like, you could view this as just a very misogynistic film, and it's really easy to just look at it that way. Mm-hmm. I think that the hope for a creator is that you can look at it and kind of decipher and determine that they're commentating on the way that, let's say, a woman who is institutionalized and in therapy and separated from her family is treated, and you can commentary on that and not necessarily be supporting it.
Of course. Yeah.
I think that would be the hope of Cronenberg for this film. But Yeah, if you look at it very surface, you're like, look at the way they treat women in this movie, and it's fucking awful.
It's bad.
It's just flat out terrible. But I would hope that the heart behind it was the message of, no, this is an extreme case because we're telling it in sort of a sci-fi horror bubble, but like the baseline of what's happening here does happen. Yeah. And especially, I mean, it still happens today, but like I'm sure it even happened more in the 70s than it happens today. There's much more light shown upon it today than there would have been then. And so I would hope that that's kind of really where, you know, you can get the message of the movie. It was made on a budget of 1.5 million and it made box office $5 million.
Hey,
I mean, it's hard for me to kind of separate because like when I think of movies in this exact time period, I'm like, this is the same time period as Halloween.
Yeah.
And then like, I'm sure that they didn't come out around the same time and they were probably shown at very different styles of theaters. But like, if you're trying to just do a correct or a direct comparison, it's hard. It's really hard because it's like a movie like that was so much more forward thinking in its storytelling and so much more real, like the way that the girls interact with each other and things like that versus this movie, which feels like it's looking backward in its style of storytelling.
Yes.
It can be I feel like it can be a rough sell. Maybe it wasn't as a rough sell at the time because people were already used to it. But I think for modern audiences, it's kind of like, ooh. Anyway, I have a couple night shift awards.
Okay.
So this is a new thing that you haven't seen yet. I still haven't figured out what I'm calling them. If they're called nighties or if they're called shifties.
Okay.
Or if they're called night shifties.
Okay.
But I want to give my first one to Oliver Reed, who is the guy who plays Dr. Hal Raglan. He gets an award for being a crazed psychiatrist who looked like a mob boss trained in the martial arts that could crush your windpipe like a toothpick.
On 100%.
Also, I found this out during the filming of this movie.
Oh, I'm so excited. What are you going to say?
Oliver Reed was arrested by Canadian police because he made a bet with another crew member that he could walk from one bar to another bar without wearing any clothes in the freezing cold winter of Canada. So he's walking from one bar to the next completely naked and gets arrested. And he's one of the main three actors in the film.
Huh. So, choice of words. That's very ballsy.
Very ballsy. Very ballsy of old Oliver Reed, which is why he gets an award. The next one goes to Robert A. Silverman. This is the guy who played Jan Hartog, who was the guy who was a former patient of Dr. Raglan's that has the bandage around his neck. But anytime he is on screen are just some of the best moments of the movie. His character is so comedic in a movie that is definitely super heavy and definitely needs a little levity here and there. And also just like, I feel like every time he's on screen, it's just a little bit of a breath of fresh air because we see so much of, we'll get into it. Anyway, he gets an award for that. And also he appeared in like a bunch of other shit. Oh yeah, he's in Jason X and Prom Night. Yep. And the next award and final goes to Samantha Edgar, who played Nola Carveth, who is the woman who's incarcerated, not incarcerated, institutionalized.
Yes.
Pretty damn close.
Very close.
Especially with Dr. Raglan. And she gets an award because she shot all of her scenes in just 4 days. She was the most well-known actor in this film.
Okay.
And so they couldn't afford to pay her for her time. So they scheduled it in a way that she would only be on set for 4 days.
That's incredible.
And she was totally into it, came in, did all of her stuff. When you think about how much they cut to her, Like so much of the movie is like, what was his name? Frank, her husband, out doing shit and like finding stuff out. And then they just cut back to little scenes of her here and there over and over and over again throughout the whole movie. And she just fucking did it all. Like 4 days, knocked it all out, went to work on something else. And I will give a slight spoiler warning here. If you don't want to hear the spoilers, skip ahead 15 to 30 seconds. She improvised the most disgusting, horrific part of the movie, which is when she licks a bloody fetus that just emerged from her body. Improvised it. Totally on her own.
Good for you.
That's why she gets a shifty. And so kind of my best moments in the movie. The beginning of the movie is great. It opens up with one of the most unsettling and memorable moments of Raglan like doing a live play with a patient and just berating him in front of a bunch of people, and they're both not naked but like uncomfortable amount of clothing.
Yeah, it's like in like if you're in college and you were in a theater class, you had to go to a bad person's or a person's bad like one man thing.
Yeah.
But you have to go.
Yep.
And it's just you feel unsettled, and it's like him just being weird.
And it's like part of this guy's therapy, which is even more weird. Like that's like part of his program for this patient. It's just bizarre. And that's how it opens up. The end of the movie, I think, holds up really, really well. So I've seen this movie once before. We watched it last week, and all I remembered of the movie was like the last 30 minutes. And the last 30 minutes were like pretty quickly moving and really eventful and like really intense and like scary and good.
Yeah.
And so when I went into this movie, I'm like, oh, I remember this movie, but it took us an hour to get to that movie.
Yes. Kind of a keep going.
So I think the kill scenes are good. There's not a lot of them, but I do think they handle them well. They're weird. They're creepy. They're bizarre. I like them a lot. And then also best moments. Anytime the character Jan Hartog is on screen, he just nails his part. Worst moments. It's a bit slow.
It's really slow.
The middle of the movie, I feel, doesn't do much to build the tension. Even though we have those kill scenes thrown in here and there, which I really thought were good and very useful for making it a horror film, I feel like they don't take the time or maybe they took too much time. I just feel like the tension doesn't get built. I don't have any like stakes in what's going on for the most part.
That's a great way to say it.
I think this movie is very guilty of doing something that tons of movies do, that I personally notice, and maybe not everybody is turned off by this, which is why it happens in tons of movies and no one says anything. But me personally, I can be very critical at times, which is why I do a fucking podcast. This movie makes a grave error in that it just assumes that the audience should care about Frank and Nola's relationship.
That's it.
I feel like they never gave us a reason to. And like, even when we finally get to see Frank interacting with Nola, it's in this weird, like trying to pull a fast one on her without her knowing about it. And like, he says things because she'll say like, oh, don't you love me or whatever. And like he says was like, oh, I do love you. I want the best for you. But like he's doing it in a moment where he's like trying to con her. Mm-hmm. And so like, I don't know that I believe it. And so I just never saw anything in the film that made me care about Frank and Nola getting together or even Nola getting better. The movie didn't make me care about her being institutionalized.
I would say I didn't care about any person in the movie. Like, I mean, whether you have a movie about a hero or a movie about horror or a movie about or any story that's in real life, there is a thing that you need to get invested in somehow to care why you're watching this movie.
Right.
And like you said, it just didn't really do it.
Yeah, it just didn't hit those moments, which I think made it a little bit tough because it's and maybe that is a little bit of what hurts it, in that it was the way it was written, as, you know, it's David Cronenberg kind of dealing with these emotions and all these things that happen, going through a divorce, and then also going through a really rough custody battle. Like, that can really fuck you up, but it can also make you like super one-sided.
Right.
And I feel like we never got to, there was never a moment of redemption for Nola, not even one that was offered that she refused. And so I just felt like because of that, it is kind of a boring story.
You are rarely articulate when you're mad.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like, I feel like the movie as a whole isn't a bad movie, because there are great horror elements that I really, really like. And I will watch this movie again, but I do think that it's not a great story.
Yeah.
Which I think is fair to say.
Yeah.
So we're also going to do a scare scale. This is how scary the film is on just a 1 to 5. Because we used to just say, hey, is this film scary?
Right.
And now I felt like we could add a little bit of, kind of leeway here and there. Okay. So for me, a 1 means that Hannah, my wife, would watch this film.
Gotcha.
Which is, I guess, also still breaks the scale sometimes, because I push her to the limits and like I got her to watch Us, whereas I feel like Us is fairly scary, but I still got her to watch it. I would put this film at a 3 on the scare scale, and it's really just for the last 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. The rest of the movie is a 1.
Yeah. I was going to give it the same. I don't necessarily think it's that scary. And if, like, especially like you said, start to finish, not scary. Last 30 minutes, there's some elements. Some of the, creatures are kind of gross, and heck, no one likes licking a bloody baby. Yeah, I mean, it's right in the middle.
Yeah.
Most wives probably wouldn't want to watch this. But
unless you're a female horror fan, there are those out there.
Yeah, you know what I meant.
I'm not married to one. So Rotten Tomatoes has this currently at an 81%. Okay. I am giving this movie on the chicken nugget scale a 65.
I'm gonna give like a 40.
What's your thumbs up, thumbs down? It's okay.
I'd probably give it a thumbs down.
That's okay.
I don't think you necessarily need to see it if you're a Cronenberg fan. If you are and you want to see them all, great. But
that's true. See,
they get better.
I had people when they found out we were doing this movie, I did have some people say that like, oh, they like really, really love The Brood. And I think that there are those people that are gonna be out there who want to see that more kind of classically horror style movie from him. Whereas even Cronenberg's other horror stuff get much more sci-fi-y. But for me personally, if I'm going to sit down and watch a Cronenberg film, I would definitely reach for Scanners over this. Obviously, The Fly is a masterpiece. Yeah. So like there's that. But even talking about some of his lesser works, like I'm definitely going to grab Scanners before I grab this again.
Yeah. It was slow. To me, it felt a little dated.
Yeah.
And
it has that same vibe of like The Omen. Another 70s like traditional classical horror movie, which, people like them. I'm not saying that they're bad, but maybe it's because we're young, because we're poisoned by modern storytelling styles, but it can be a slog sometimes. I'll be honest and say even Star Wars: A New Hope can be boring for me, depending on when I'm watching it.
I mean, I'll be honest and say that because of my age, most movies before the 80s are sometimes just kind of a tough watch.
It can be.
And that's just me and my, my lexicon and what I was, built on.
Cool. So we are going to split. I am going to give it a thumbs up. And it's hard for me to like kind of justify it without saying just that like it's obviously an important movie because people like it and because it made the Criterion Collection.
No, that's a reason. And enough other people think it should be watched.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think I would almost say that like you could rent it somewhere and then cut to the last half hour of the movie and just watch that and go for a crazy fucking ride real fucking fast. Read the back of the box description, watch the last 30 minutes. If you really need like a lot of build up to it, then go watch the whole movie. But those last 30 minutes are so batshit insane that like I really liked it. I really liked the last 30 minutes of the movie. And so thumbs up for me. But yeah, that about does it for us here at the Night Shift. For Night Shift Video, my name is James. I am a horrible host. And this guy is
Josh.
And we're just saying, stay spoopy out there.